Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We are live on Twitter. We are live on YouTube. And I know the Mets season is over, but Ibby and myself are here with you each and every single week, doing our thing, putting it down. And of course, the best way to interact with this show is live. That's where your comments come in real time. But if you don't have time to watch us right here, right now, don't worry. You can always check out the replay of this show on YouTube as soon as we finish up the broadcast. And of course, you can listen to the audio version of this podcast tomorrow morning, wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Ibby, how you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. Getting over a little bit of a cold. I know that's small peanuts to what you've been dealing with over the last couple of days. So I hope you're doing better in terms of your health. But for me over here on the East Coast, I'm doing okay. I am ready to talk some Mets. I have a lot of stuff on my mind, a lot of baseball stuff going through my mind. I think like we said last week, the break was needed. But even though, I don't know about your friends, John, but for me on my end, some of them are still very anti-talking anything Mets. So this is my outlet on Wednesdays now because I need to talk to somebody because a lot of my friends are like, I'm not there yet. I'm not ready. I can't do it. Okay, I understand. I get it. I got to stay in tune because of the show. So this is my opportunity to talk. So I hope you're ready to go.
Yeah, man, I'm ready to rock, and I appreciate the well wishes for everybody who's watching this. Maybe some of you follow me on Twitter, maybe some of you don't, or on Instagram. I currently have COVID. I'm not making any secrets about that. It kind of sucks, but I am vaxxed and boosted, so I'm feeling pretty good. Symptoms have been pretty mild, all things considered, but I am basically confined to my bedroom because I have roommates. So, it's been a little bit maddening more than anything else because, if I didn't have COVID, Ibby, I feel good enough to just kind of be at least doing some stuff, just kind of going about life. I don't feel 100%. I'm a little nasally. Maybe it reflects in my voice and things like that. But, I've been watching a lot of TV. I've been watching a lot of movies, catching up on some stuff. And I've had the opportunity to really just like deep dive into the Mets and the offseason thoughts for this. And of course, into some Jets stuff for the other show that I do. So I'm ready to rock. And I think this episode's going to be a little different because I do want to open up, Ibby, talking about something that is not necessarily Mets related. I want to get it out of the way because obviously the World Series is set. It's going to be Phillies. It's going to be Astros. And I think it really makes a lot of sense to start there simply because this new playoff structure that it was very polarizing. Some people loved it. Some people hated it, right? But what we have here is one of the worst teams to make the postseason in terms of regular season record in the Phillies, taking on probably the best team, if not in all of baseball, but certainly in the American League. So your thoughts 1 year in onto this playoff structure of, do you like it? Do you think it works as the Phillies get set to take on the Astros?
I mentioned this last week, and I don't understand why people are so bent out of shape. Look, things were a little bit pushed forward this year because of the making up of time because of the lockout and stuff like that. But look, we've been down this road before when we talked about, the 88 win Braves winning it. I saw I completely forgot that when the Cardinals beat us in 06, they were like an 82 win team and they went on to go win the World Series. Yep. It's like, look, you're going to get times where good teams go down. Mets go down, Braves go down, Dodgers go down. Okay. You're going to have these times when teams of destiny, which Philly thinks they are right now, a team of destiny. And we saw that when the Nats won, things start clicking. It's all about getting hot at the right time and being healthy and unsung heroes and people really stepping up to the dish and, Bryce Harper having his moment and, the Stros just dominate. There's so many ways to go about this. I don't have an issue with it. I think a lot of people just bent out of shape because the matchups that they wanted to see are not happening. And now you're, I guess I have to say, stuck with, Houston versus Philly, but I think it'll be a good series.
Yeah, me too. And, I think there's a lot of sour grapes from a lot of fan bases. And this is not me attacking Mets Twitter because I understand you said at the top of the show that, there's a lot of people who still don't want to talk baseball. I love baseball and I really enjoy watching baseball. And I usually watch the playoffs when the Mets aren't good. You know, if the Mets are out of it and they don't make the playoffs and they're eliminated by August, I'll usually be in tune to the playoffs. When the Mets are in the playoffs and they get eliminated, I usually just check in because it's kind of a bummer for me. Like, I don't like watching every moment of it thinking like, oh, what this would be like if my team was in it. So admittedly, I haven't been living and dying by this postseason because, you know, my team made it to the postseason and then got eliminated. And so I care a little bit less, you know, but having said all of that, I think there's a lot of sour grapes from a lot of different fan bases, which is fair. When your team loses, it sucks. But I think taking this entire format to task is weird because, look, yes, they've expanded the playoffs. There are teams that some people think shouldn't even be in it. And I use those air quotes around teams like Philly and stuff like that. But you know what? It'd be in the entire postseason era. You never had to be the best team. And this goes all the way back. I'm not even talking about the wild card era. I'm talking about once they created playoffs. Like, yeah, there was a time when, you know, you were the best team in the league. You won the pennant based on record and you played in the World Series. Well, then, yeah, if you're going back to the 50s and the 40s, then sure, the two best teams always played based on record. But once you started going into the playoff format, I mean, you look at the Mets in 88. I just try to keep it in-house with something like that. You know, it's a great example. Mets were a really good team. You know, the mid to late 80s Mets should have / could have been dynastic, and they weren't. And it happened. So I just don't get the whole, we have to throw out the entire format. Now, look, does all these teams making it water down 162? Sure. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, the more that you add, the more you are watering it down. I do understand that perspective. But for me, I just don't have a huge problem with this playoff structure. And I don't think it's like, oh man, my Mets didn't make it further. That to me is also a weird sentiment of like, oh, they're watching this and they're like, wow, one game against Atlanta and we could have been here. It's like, dude, you don't know that.
You don't know that.
You don't know that. The Braves got eliminated. The Dodgers got eliminated. The Yankees got eliminated. You know, I mean, Seattle, we talked about it last week. Seattle almost, for a team that got swept by Houston, Seattle took them to the brink basically in every game. So you have no idea what's going to happen. And so, you know, for me, I do think ultimately this is better for baseball because I do think that more teams being in it longer will help grow the sport of baseball. Now, I think baseball misses the mark on a lot of things, and I think we're watching one of it right now. I mean, Lori Rubinson tweeted last night. She said, how come there's no game on tonight or tomorrow or the next day? I know you have to plan for like series going the distance, but once the CSs don't go the distance, move the World Series up, guys. Like, you lose everything. You lose all the juice. And for me, that's the biggest criticism I have of, you know, any sport that goes on a series kind of metric, right? It's like, if your series ends early, you got to start the next round. You got to try, especially if both teams are just sitting there, just twiddling their thumbs. I don't know. You know, there's got to be a way. It'd be for the TV schedule, the TV money, all of that stuff. There's got to be a way to make this make sense so that we don't have to wait, you know, 4, 5, 6 days to start the World Series.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the only thing I can pull from it is like you said, they plan it out for things going the distance, and then maybe that affects what's going on with those stations that they're going to be on, and it's on Fox, right? So I don't know what you know, how that ruins their programming or changes things up, or what kind of hoops they would have to go to move those things up. But at the same time, I would think you would want to get it started early because, look, for all the jokes that we throw at baseball and where the ratings are for certain things, look, you still want to have, you know, you still want to pull in those 12, 13 million viewers, whatever it is that's going to be for this World Series, as opposed to the, you know, 2 million that you pull in for some rerun. Like, I mean, that's the way I would look at it. But again, I'm not a TV executive. I don't know. You know, I don't know what goes on. I don't know what goes on in those circles and how that really works. But, you know, I'm with you. I mean, you lose that juice, and it happens in all sports, whether it's, you know, it goes to the NBA as well. When you're watching a great series and the next thing you know, they're off for 3 days. Like, what the hell are they off for 3 days for? Like, I was all pumped up watching the one game, and then all of a sudden you got to wait 3-4 days for the next one. It's just the spacing is too much.
Yeah, and like I said, I think any sport that deals in series has to deal with that, right? So the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, and sometimes that's why football is king, right? You just set your
Right.
clock to it, and it's like, when's the game? Saturday, 8 p.m. Like when the playoff game's going to be.
Yeah.
When the next one's going to be. And you'll know by the time the previous round wraps up who's going to face who and what time slot they're going to be in.
Yeah.
So, it is a little easier there, but I think with the NBA, I think the NBA has enough of a fan base kind of built
Oh,
in.
yeah. They do.
Locked in, ready to go. Now, I'm not a big NBA fan. I'll admit that. I never have been growing up. I've tried to get into it. I just can't. Like, I'm a very surface level fan of basketball.
Yeah.
And I think NHL would love to grow and get a little deeper, get a little richer in terms of their fan base. But they also have a great, rabid, smaller fan base.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you try to compare those two sports to baseball just falls a little bit short because baseball used to be top of the mountain and they're not anymore. I think baseball has the opportunity to get back there, but I don't think they are as it stands right now. So, I don't know how they can fix this. I don't know how. I would just think that maybe you can build in some kind of contingency plan to say, hey, you know what? We can't move the game up 4 days, but we can move the game up 2 days, or we can move the game up at least a day or something like that so that you get out of your own way a little bit. But I want to jump into the comments. We got a few people watching. We got Stevie Mac saying, probably got it from the Phillies, talking about my COVID case. Thanks for that. And he says, all my Phillies friends are beyond happy they didn't face the Mets in the wild card. And I could see that. The Mets had their number all season long, but who knows? Because, Philly has gone on a tear. And then jumping over to James Dowling, and maybe this is where I'll bounce it to you. Are we all Astros fans now? So, it's hard to root in the division, obviously, but a lot of people have issues with the Braves, the Astros, and what happened when they basically cheated their way to a World Series. So where do you stand on this? Phillies versus Astros before we start talking some Mets stuff.
Yeah, I will never root for someone within our division to win. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I was going to rock this hat today since I'm always rocking a different type of hat. This is the AAA affiliate. A buddy of mine is a huge Astros fan. He went to a game out in Houston. I told him how much I thought their Space Cowboys hat was pretty cool. So he picked this up for me one time. Pretty cool hat. But yeah, I'll be rooting for the Astros. I love Yordan Alvarez. I think he's incredible. But yeah, I'm rooting for them. I can't root for Philly. No shot in hell. And you asked me this question when we first started this show, when we were talking about the playoffs and what was going on, and I told you Houston pisses everybody off. I choose chaos when the Mets aren't there, so I will root for Houston through and through. So yeah, I'll be rooting for them.
Well, and here's the other side of that. Rail says, unpopular, been getting slammed, but until the Stros return the rings they didn't earn in 2017, can't root for them. I know the Phils are division rivals, but I can't root for Houston. And then James Dowling saying, everyone was cheating. The Astros were just better at it.
And if there's one thing I'll throw in there real quick when it comes to that whole thing, when it comes to the Stros in 17, not to go off on a tangent, but let's be honest. If you look back at those series, if the Yanks just hit a little, they would have won. Simple as that. But the Yanks couldn't hit. That's really what it came down to. Those were low-scoring games. They weren't running them out of the building. The Yanks couldn't hit. If they hit just a little bit, they would have beat them, but they couldn't do it.
Yeah, and then Rael responding saying, they got caught, so I guess they weren't that good at it, LOL. And then Stephen Mack brings up a good point saying, rooting for Dusty Baker to finally get that ring. And
Trey Mancini, too.
Trey Mancini, yeah,
another guy.
Good dude, honestly, went through so much. And here's my thing. I'm kind of in the middle on this because I'm with you. I can't root for another team in the division to win a World Series. That's just like, I'm not wired that
Especially
way.
when the Braves just won. And the Nats
the Braves just won. The Nats just won. Like, I can't root for Philly. Like, I can't. However, I will say this Phillies team to me, and this might be unpopular, is not unlikable. Unless they're playing the Mets, obviously, then, fuck them, and I want nothing to do with them. But this Phillies team, to me, watching them night in and night out, they are not an unlikable team. I know that a lot of people don't like Bryce Harper. I don't get why. To me, Bryce Harper plays his ass off. The guy played with half an elbow for half the season, came back early after surgery to, continue to lead this team from an offensive perspective. Guy plays like his hair's on fire. He went toe-to-toe with Jonathan Papelbon, which nobody likes, in the Nats dugout that time. So I just think, from him on down, there were real reasons to not like the Chase Utley, Papelbon, Ryan Howard, those Jimmy Rollins, and also look, they caused so much pain for us Mets fans in 07 and 08. So, and beyond realistically, but so those teams I didn't like. I strongly disliked. Well, you know what? I strongly dislike the Braves team that is currently constituted. Yeah. And for some reason, I don't know. I wanted Bryce Harper to be a Met. And I think if the Wilpons would have sold the team a couple of years earlier, Bryce Harper would be a Met. He was the perfect fit at the perfect time. And if Steve Cohen had the reins, I think he'd be a Met. So I like Bryce Harper. I always have as a ball player. And so I don't hate them. That said, I cannot root for them. And to me, I don't know. I think that sometimes cheating is a part of baseball, and I think that people come up with new and creative ways to cheat all the time, whether it's stealing signs from second base or, cutting baseballs, spitting on baseballs, all these things. And I think baseball likes to pick and choose what's an acceptable level of cheating and what's not. And until they sort out their shit with steroids, until they sort out, baseball would have taken a hardline stance and said, you know what? We're stripping the title from the Astros. We're doing it. We have balls. That's it. And we're stripping all the records from all the steroid guys. Now, I disagree with those things. But if you're going to sit there and take those hard stances, then I've got no beef. But they just toe in the water on everything. And so for me, I honestly, I just don't care that they cheated. They got caught. It is what it is. Stevie Mac pulling up another one, randomly having shiny ears. Yeah, they
Damn
pick and choose. They pick and choose what they want. So for me, I'm rooting for the Astros. I just don't care.
Yeah, I'm all for, again, like I said, I'm all for Houston, but I'm with you. I fucking love Bryce Harper. It's tough. It's tough for it to hear a Met fan say that, but I love, anybody who thinks of a baseball, if you love baseball and you think of a baseball player, Bryce Harper is a baseball player.
Top of the list.
Top of the, that. You want a guy like that on your team. And people who hate him is because you wish you had him. It's as simple as that. You wish he was wearing your jersey colors, and when he's not, you choose to hate him. But it's I respect the hell out of the guy. Look, we hate the Braves, but I thought Freddie Freeman was a hell of a ball player. I did. And I know he killed the Mets. I knew it was always going to happen, but he was a damn good ball player that you had to respect. I didn't have to respect Chase Utley. I didn't have to respect Jimmy Rollins. I didn't have to respect Ryan. Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber is a hell of a ball player, but he's also on that list. I can't freaking stand the guy because every time he faces the Mets, he just decides to hit a home run every goddamn time. So he's a guy that's just whatever. I don't need him. But yeah, all the respect in the world for Harper, but cannot allow him to get a ring. I can't do it.
Yeah, it's funny because it's one of those situations we almost had it. Rael says, by the way, I'm rooting for Zach Wheeler. Phillies, not Wheeler. The Phils. After the way that he was treated, he wanted to stay. He loved being a Met. I root for Zach and only Zach. That's also kind of fair.
That's fair.
I got to be honest. Does it sour things that Syndergaard is over there too? Maybe a little bit, but it's funny because we almost had the situation that we had in 2009. And that is a complicated one. When you start talking about, division rival versus other team in the city that you don't like, then you're in a tough spot because
I'm not watching.
Because honestly, in 2009, I had to, after what the Phillies did to us, I had to root for the Yankees, Ibby. I had to. I had no choice because how could you not root for the team in your city to at least beat the team that has given you fits, but then you're there's another ring for the Yankees. Whereas the flip side, the first time, and I'm sorry to bring it over to another sport, but the first time the Giants played the Patriots in the Super Bowl, as a Jets fan, I was listen, I hate the Patriots. I hate Bill Belichick more than anybody in my sports fandom because of the way he left the Jets and what he did and what he went on to be. So I had to root for the Giants. But then after watching that, the second time they played in the Super Bowl, I used to work like downtown Manhattan, right in the Canyon of Heroes for a Giants fan. And I was just like, I don't know if I can deal with another Super Bowl winning parade in my city.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say that I was rooting for the Patriots, but I was kind of like, you know what? If the Patriots win, they're already great. They're already a dynasty. It's another notch on their belt. And at least I won't have to see it in the city that I live in. So I am grateful, Ibby, that it is not a Yankees Phillies World Series.
Yeah, we all are. I couldn't deal with that one again. It's a tough spot, but yeah, for me, I would completely just unplug and not watch anything, not pay attention to anything. I would not deal with any of that nonsense. But luckily for us, we don't have to deal with it because the Yanks couldn't hit. But yeah, it should be a good series. I think it'll be a good series. I'm taking the Stros in 6. That's my guess. But I do think that it's going to be a good series. And to just finish up the point with Rael talking about the Wilpon stuff and Zach Wheeler. I just it's crazy how, like you mentioned, Harper, if Cohen was here a little bit earlier, we probably would have him. And I agree with you on that. The Phils are really reaping the benefits of the tail end Wilpons. Like they get, Bryce Harper, they get Zach Wheeler because of the stupidity of the Wilpons and the moronic nature of Brody Van Wagenen saying that he wasn't worth the money and this and that. And it's like, I've watched this guy dominate for the last handful of years, and he's pitching like a 1.2 ERA now in the playoffs. He's always been a fantastic pitcher. He's always had the stuff. He was finally putting it all together, and they let him walk out the door. And that always is going to make me angry because I love Zach Wheeler.
Absolutely. And then Stevie Mack with a good point as we transition this conversation away from, the World Series matchup in the playoffs to our Mets. And he said the one plus is the Phillies win. It's really going to push Steve Cohen to spend an insane amount of money. Ibby, I've been on record on this show. I think he's spending an insane amount of money regardless, because I think now is the time. However, I do think that there is maybe some extra motivation depending on how this plays out. And I think there's still, I think if the Yankees were to have advanced and won the World Series, that would have pushed him even more. I think if the Braves went on, I think that would have pushed him even more. And I do think the Phillies do fall into that category because, like you said, then we'll watch the Phillies win, the Braves win, and the Nats win 3 of the last 4 World Series. So when you look at that and you're on this 3 to 5 year self-imposed clock that Steve Cohen is, I think, look, I don't think he needs extra motivation, but I don't think extra motivation is necessarily bad. It's like when a football team talks shit about another football team and you're like, I think that other team was better anyway, but if they could print that out giant and put it on the wall as they walk out of the locker room that day, it might help a little bit.
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting. Like you said, like regardless, look, people are curious as to how high the payroll will go for our Mets, and I'm curious as well. But look, we know the comment that he made saying you should be able to build a team with $300 million. But at the same time, when you have good pieces that are a part of your club and they become free, well, then you got to pay those guys. Well, that number, that 300 might go a little bit higher because of other spending that you did, and you obviously want to keep guys here in-house. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because I'm very, very curious. The more I sit down, the more I look at things on how they're going to try and improve this team, what areas they're going to attack, and how they're truly going to go about spending this money. Because there's a lot of curious cases within house alone, and I'm sure we're going to talk about those in a little bit. And I'll throw it to you first. Like, who do you want to talk about first? How do you want to go about it in terms of the in-house candidates, contracts, numbers, what might happen, who might stay, how do you want to go about it?
Well, I think there were 2. Okay. So I think free agency for the Mets goes through 2 places. And I think they're curious places because kind of like we touched on last week, one for me is in-house and the other one is not. And I do think that those 2 things kind of have a little bit to do with each other as well because of the amount of money. And those 2 players are Jacob deGrom and Aaron Judge. And anybody who's a Yankee fan, I've talked to my Yankee fan buddies, I've tried very carefully. I'm not being a prick here. I'm not being the Mets are going to sign Aaron Judge. Thanks. Wow. I'm not sitting here going like, the Mets are going to sign Aaron Judge because the Mets sign everybody and they have Steve Cohen.
Right.
look, I'm not that kind of Met fan, but
Okay.
I will say, and I have said, that Steve Cohen is the closest Major League Baseball owner that we have seen in the last several decades to George Steinbrenner.
Yes.
He has the deepest pockets, and he has shown an extreme willingness to just go all in and spend. Now, obviously, the Dodgers are probably a closer team to the Steinbrenner Yankees than the Mets are, because the Dodgers have won a World Series. The Dodgers have been consistently successful. Yeah, but the Dodgers are not owned by one guy.
Person, right.
Right. So that's why I say that Cohen is the closest, because he's just one guy. And like you said, if Epler comes to him and says, look, we can get Shohei Ohtani, this is what we have to give up, and this is probably the contract we have to give him, Cohen doesn't have to go back to a board of directors. He just goes, okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. So when I look at this situation, I said to Tom, who co-hosts the Jets show with me, I said to him, look, man, there is no free agent that fits any one team better than Aaron Judge fits the Mets. I'm sorry, Ibby. I know everybody loves Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo's really good. Aaron Judge is so much better than him, it is unquantifiable. The Mets have an opening in the outfield because Brandon Nimmo is a free agent. That opening might be in center field, where Aaron Judge could play for at least the first few years of the contract. Or you could move one of the other guys to center field, because they've both played there in Canna and Marte for a good chunk of their careers, and you could put Aaron Judge in a corner. Either way, Aaron Judge fits this team. You could argue the biggest thing that the Mets need is power. Somebody to protect Pete Alonso. Somebody to, or in this case, maybe even bat in front of Pete Alonso. So when I look at Aaron Judge, he is the perfect fit for this Mets team right now. Now, obviously, they have DeGrom, and they have to sort out what's going on with DeGrom. And both of these players are potentially going to make upwards of $40 million. So I think free agency for the Mets goes through their in-house person first with DeGrom. And then next, I think it's Aaron Judge. I think those are the first two dominoes that have to fall, because look, I love Trey Turner. I think Trey Turner's a very underrated baseball player considering what he can do. There's other guys that have opted out that I think would make good Mets, like Carlos Correa. I think you could look at Rodon. I think you can look at some other pieces. I think you could look at a potential short-term contract for Verlander. There's a lot of ways the Mets can go in building this thing, but I think they're crazy if they don't look first at DeGrom and then at Aaron Judge, because they're the two best players available, and they both fit the Mets' two biggest needs, which is an ace pitcher to go with Max Scherzer, and power and legit absolute offensive force to go with Alonso.
Yeah, it's the reason why this is so interesting to me, because we talked a little bit about it last week, but the more and more I think about it, it's just like how you're going to construct this team, like I said, in a way that is better than what you had this year. Now, you can't just assume you're going to win 100 games again. It doesn't happen that often, but still, you want to be a 90-plus win team, complete for a division, complete for a World Series, right? This team needs power. It does. We talked about finding cheap power, finding proven power. But outside of an Aaron Judge, the question really becomes, well, where are you going to find that power? Like I said, I still have to do a little bit of a deeper dive as to who exactly is available. There are guys, if you want to go around the infield and things like that, like a Correa, things like that. Sure. But I think the main question when it comes to a Judge and how this team wants to go about spending their money would be back to Brandon Nimmo. And I the reason why I say that is because I've been on this show saying extend Brandon Nimmo for the longest time. I've also been saying that I thought it would take $120 million to do it, especially after this year. I said he's probably up in like the 120 area now. Now, I see some people that are putting out great articles. Shout out to Ryan Finkelstein, friend of the show over at Locked On Mets, putting out a great article talking about what he thinks Nimmo's contract might be and some of the places where he might go. He did a comp, and he said that his numbers are similar in terms of like weighted runs created plus to that of George Springer. Now, he's hitting the market earlier than Springer did. I think Springer was Springer 31 when he hit the market? I can't hear you. I think your thing cut out.
Sorry, 30 or 31, yeah.
Yeah, so he was a little bit older, but a lot more accolades to his thing. He was a 4-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, World Series MVP. Like, he had a resume more than Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo's younger, but the numbers are close. Now, Boris, as an agent, is going to push for, well, George Springer was older and got $150 million over 6 years. That's the contract I want for my client, Brandon Nimmo. Now, that's going to become, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, am I really that off where I was saying 120? Was I really $30 million off? And then I looked at it and I go, well, I was under the assumption that Brandon Nimmo would get a 5-year deal at 24 a year. That's or a little over 20 a year, I should say. And I thought that would be the place where it made sense. And now I'm seeing where I was off. It's like, well, it's adding a 6th year to it, taking up his entire prime essentially. And are you going to give $144 to $150 million to Brandon Nimmo? And if you don't want to do that because you're saying, well, if I'm going to pay that for that type of talent, well, I'd rather just go all in and then go for a Judge instead. Now, that's really what it comes down to, because what do you think Brandon Nimmo is worth in comparison to, if that's what his worth is and that's what the market is, I'd much rather pay an Aaron Judge instead. Now, I can do a whole comp to Trey Turner as well in a minute, but in terms of Aaron Judge, I think that's really where it comes down to. Do you want to spend $150 million on Brandon Nimmo, or are you willing to really go deep into your pockets to try and get an Aaron Judge to fit this team?
Well, and it's funny that you bring it up that way, because if you just do some basic math, right? And I know it's more complicated than this, but if you look at the 150, right, six years, let's say, for Brandon Nimmo, and you're going to get him to around $150 million. Well, if you turn around and you look at Aaron Judge, who's a bit older, right? So you're going to go, if I were the Mets, I would try to go high AAV, lower years. That's what I would try to do. Right. I'm looking at 45 million over 45 to 50 million over the course of 4 or 5 years. Well, let's just, for argument's sake, say it's $45 million over 4 years. That's $180 million.
And he could try to go again afterwards.
Right. And so now you're looking at a situation, and look, it might take more than that, right? I'm not being naive to this, but if you say 45 million over 5 years, that's 225. Is 225 for Aaron Judge that much bigger of a difference than 150 for Brandon Nimmo? You see what I mean? Like, you start to mess with those numbers a little bit. And it's like, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I'm going to look to spend more of it first for Aaron Judge before I commit to Brandon Nimmo. So that's where my head goes when we talk about those two players. And again, it's not really a 1-for-1. It just is because they both play the outfield. They both play center field, and you could plug them in immediately into what this team is. The other part of it is, and look, I know Brandon Nimmo's an on-base machine, even though his on-base numbers took a little bit of a hit this past season, but his overall numbers were very good. But for me, Ibby, there's a lot of guys on this team right now. I'm not talking about guys that you could bring in like a Trey Turner. Right. There's a lot of guys on this team as it stands right now that I would be comfortable leading off every day. I would bat Jeff McNeil 1 most days. I could bat Starling Marte 1 most days. With the right matchup, I would stomach batting Mark Canha 1 in some situations, especially if Aaron Judge is on your team. Like, if you're going to sit there and tell me, okay, against lefties, we could go Canha, Lindor, Judge, and Alonso. And against righties, we could go McNeil, Lindor, Judge, and Alonso. Mm-hmm. That's good enough for me. Or Marte, Lindor, Judge, and Alonso. That's good enough for me. I'll take the OBP hit that Brandon Nimmo would give you for the power-packed punch. And I don't just mean power in terms of home runs. I mean power in terms of legitimate pop through 1 through 4 of a guy like Marte, Lindor, Judge, and Alonso. Give me that 100 times out of 100. And I like Brandon Nimmo, but I would say goodbye.
It's so interesting to me, and I was thinking about this as well. And I see Stevie Mac's comment there. If you can just pull it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talking about how center field is free agency is awful. It's going to pump up Nimmo's worth. He's good, but I agree with you. His numbers aren't that good. Like, I keep on coming back to that because I really want to try and dive in deeper into the Met fan thought process when it comes to, like, why does and this isn't me defending Brandon Nimmo being better than Aaron Judge. That is not what I am doing. I'm full fully believe that Aaron Judge is a better ball player than Brandon Nimmo. But it's just crazy.
I mean, of
to me
course
because,
you do. You'd be off the show. I would literally kick you out of this podcast right now.
I love Brandon Nimmo, but I'm not going to sit here and do that. But look, he's gotten to the point in his career over the last 4. And again, I told you I could bring it back to Trey Turner, different positions. And I'm not arguing that, Nimmo has a higher ceiling than a Turner type, because I think Turner has a higher ceiling. But when you look over the last 4 years, the numbers in terms of the OPS and the weighted runs created plus, the numbers that a lot of teams are looking at now are very similar. Now, look, Turner's going to make double what Nimmo gets, but that goes to show you that Nimmo was a damn good ball player. So I'm very curious as to why Mets fans are always so passive when it comes to what Brandon Nimmo brings to the table for a team. And I get it. This is a tough spot because we're comparing him to a guy who just hit freaking 62 home runs.
Right.
Like it's a big difference there. But overall, as a player, I feel like even if that wasn't the case, if Judge was coming off of 45 home runs and what he's done or whatever, I still think people would be clamoring to kick Nimmo out the door. But at the same time, I think people need to realize that he is still a very damn good ball player. There's a lot of teams where he's going to make sense. He's going to get paid. He's going to get paid. He makes sense in Seattle. He makes sense in St. Louis. He makes sense in either one of the Chicagos. There's a lot of places he makes sense and will help the top of those lineups thrive. And I'm with you. There are guys on this team that can also lead off, and maybe this team doesn't skip a beat. Maybe it doesn't. I just think that, having a Brandon Nimmo atop our lineup has been beneficial for us over the years that he's been healthy, obviously. But it's going to be interesting because, to bring it back to your AAV comment with Judge, I think he wants the years because I think he knows his body's going to break down because he's bigger. I think that's the main thing, because you brought it up saying how the 225, that's similar to what the offer that the Yanks gave him over 7, and he said no thank you. I think he wanted 8-9 years because he wants to cover the entire length.
He's not going to get it, though.
I know.
He won't get that.
He's going to push for it, and maybe he doesn't, but maybe someone's still going to give him a higher at 7 years. Like, I think, I'll put my prediction out there right now. I don't think he's coming to the Mets. I think the Yanks have a hard time bringing him back and spending that money. I think them taking the PR hit is also a scare for them, but I would not be shocked to see this play out exactly the way the Yankees played out with Robinson Cano.
I knew you were going to say Cano.
It was going to be Cano, because they're going to say, look, we're going to give you $285 million over 8 years. And then the Giants are going to come in and they're going to say, we're going to give you $330 million over 9 years, or $350 over 10 years. And he's going to say, you going to come close to that? And they're going to say, nope. And he's going to say, okay, I'll see you later. That's what I think is going to end up happening, because I think he wants the years for coverage.
Robinson Cano is such a great comp. And look, Robinson Cano in his prime, not the player that Judge is in his prime. Okay. Again, not comparing them as one for one, but where they are similar is that Aaron Judge is the far and away best player on the Yankees right now. Robinson Cano, statistically and ability-wise, was far and away the best player on those Yankee teams. He was a cemented, legitimate superstar on the Yankees in the prime of his career. Now, you could argue that the Yankees probably made the right move in letting him go and letting him take that money from Seattle. However, the Yankees' asset allocation after that was absolute dog shit, because they signed Jacoby Ellsbury, right, which was the worst move you could possibly do. And you look at the Yankees, they've got a weird pattern of behavior of doing that now, because you look no further than what they did last year. Now, I could see the Yankees not wanting to bring in a guy like Correa because of what he did in 2017 and the PR hit that would have potentially been for that team. But the Yankees traded for the bad contract of Josh Donaldson, $50 million, just to get out of Gary Sanchez. They gave away the better player in Urshela to bring on the worst player in Donaldson to allow the Twins to sign Correa. Now, I know Correa is going to opt out or already has opted out or whatever, so it was just 1 year. But the asset allocation there was so dumb, because what the Yankees paid for Rizzo and Donaldson, they could have signed Freddie Freeman.
Yeah.
And they could have, listen, I know that the Cubs are kicking themselves for doing this, But the Cubs made a baseball decision and designated Kyle Schwarber for assignment. Yes. You're telling me that the Yankees couldn't have just DFA'd Gary Sanchez and say, look, come what may, maybe he'll go somewhere else and be better, but we've given him all the possible rope that we could give him. So we're going to DFA Gary Sanchez. We're going to keep Urshela at third base. We're going to use that money, go sign Freddie Freeman. That was such a better move. That would have been such a better overall position to be in than what they did. So look, this is not a Yankees show, but their asset allocation was so strange to me. And I think asset allocation is always the thing that you have to think about when you're talking about big time free agent teams. When you're talking about the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets, for a long time, Boston, now maybe San Francisco, you're looking at Texas Rangers have a lot of money to spend. It's how they can do it creatively, Ibby. And that's why I think it's very hard to pinpoint what the Mets are going to do. We all have our opinions of what they should do, but it's hard to pinpoint what the Mets can do because, look, right now we can look at this team and say there's no room for Correa, right? Because they've got shortstop, they've got a second baseman, they've got a third baseman of the future. So why would they bring in a guy like Correa? Well, if the Mets really like Correa and Correa fits, they could sign Correa, convince him to play third base long-term. Then all of a sudden that frees up Brett Baty to be the centerpiece of a trade to go get something else. And I don't mean a small piece. I mean a significant piece, maybe a controllable starting pitcher or maybe an outfielder or something like that. So all of a sudden you can move things around on the chessboard. And that's why I think the Mets are in such an interesting place right now because it's all about what they can do.
Yeah, and it's gonna be, like I said, I look at how this free agency is lining up, and I'm just trying to, like, there's different ways you go about it, but the in-house ways that the Mets choose to spend, and it's gonna start early, whether it's the option for Cookie or talking about Taiwan or talking about Bassett and obviously DeGrom and Nimmo, the bigger guys. It's going to be very interesting to see how they go about it because I'm very, very curious on where the improvements are going to go. Because, like I said, they're not going to just bring everybody back. That's not going to happen. There's going to be some changes. But the crazy thing here is I think people are assuming, and this is where Mets Twitter is going to blow up and they're going to be bitching and moaning throughout the entire offseason. They think they're going to get all of these guys. And it's not going to happen. I really honestly think our offseason is going to be very similar to what last year's was in depth pieces that make a lot of sense, couple big splashes here and there, and filling out the roster. I really think that's going to be it. You're going to see, like, don't be shocked. I'll give you an example. Don't be shocked if Bassett's gone, Walker's gone, and I'll say that, and they pick up Cookie, and then they decide to go out and sign Andrew Heaney. Like something like that. Like that, you could see something like that happen, and you're wondering, well, is he better than what, Chris Bassett was or what Taiwan Walker was to us? But look, it's going to be, like you talked about before, asset allocation, spending money smartly, doing here. Just because you have all the money in the world doesn't mean you're going to spend all the money in the world. But it's going to be very interesting to see how, really, to me, it comes down to that power aspect. I want to know how they're going to get more power into this lineup. And if it's not Judge, where is that power going to come from? That's the most interesting thing to me this offseason. It really is for this team.
I totally agree. Jump back into the comments before we head into the break. Stevie Mack with a couple good points. He said, just to clarify, I like Nimmo a lot. It's just Boris being his agent and that market is what it is makes me iffy about it. Really interested in what his number winds up being. And then he also says, to my point, you could have Correa at second, move Squirrel to left with Beatty and Escobar at third. Also an option for sure. And it's funny. I'll just say this before we head into the break. As far as the Brandon Nimmo thing goes, I think, Ibby, that's the thing. See, you have a very level-headed approach as somebody who likes Brandon Nimmo because you're like, look, I really like him, but if the Mets can upgrade, we have to look towards upgrading.
Yes, absolutely.
I think a lot of other people are too caught up with the homegrown, and they're like, they got to bring back Jake. They got to bring back Diaz. They got to bring back Nimmo. And it's like, they got to bring back Diaz. They should do everything they can to bring back Jake. He's a little bit of a different situation because I think if he just wants to go somewhere else, you're not going to be able to keep him, and that remains to be seen. But Nimmo is not in that category. Nimmo has never had a season. Obviously, they play all different positions, but Nimmo is not DeGrom, right? From a legacy standpoint, from an ability standpoint. And Nimmo has never had one season that touches the season that Edwin Diaz just had for the Mets, nor has he ever had one season that touches the season that Diaz had for the Mariners before we got him. Diaz has had 2 unbelievable, elite, top of his game, best closer in baseball seasons. Brandon Nimmo has never been that at his position. So, I think you just need to be fair for what kind of player he is. And I think that you're very fair about it. But I think there are some other people who kind of lose sight of what Brandon Nimmo is as a ball player compared to some other folks. So with that said, Ibby, we're about 45 minutes in. Let's take a quick break for everybody watching live, just about 10 seconds. This is John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez. Till Mets do us part. We'll be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. Till Mets do us part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. And of course, if you can't interact with us and watch us live, you can catch the broadcast as soon as we're done over on our YouTube channel. Just remember to subscribe and turn those notifications on so that you never miss an episode live or otherwise. And of course, if you want to listen to us instead of watch us, you can do that too. Starting tomorrow morning, this will be available as an audio podcast wherever it is you get your podcast, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. Ibby, I want to turn our attention over to the pitching side of things because, look, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit with DeGrom, but he's almost just in a different category because of who he is, the level of pitcher that he is, and, of course, the level of money that he would potentially command. I want to talk about the rest of the rotation because the Mets have a lot of holes, and Stevie Mac brings up a good point, something that I've said on this show before. I have a feeling there will be another Bassett-type trade to round out the rotation. The Mets have been really successful with this type of trade, going and getting a number 3 or a number 2-ish that slots into that number 3 spot. First with Marcus Stroman, then with Bassett. The Mets have been very aggressive with these kinds of moves. So I think 2 things are true. I think Bassett is gone. And I think that the Mets will be able to fill his spot in the rotation with another Bassett-type trade, like Stevie Mac says. What do you think?
I'm with you on that. I think that there's gonna have to be some creativity here, and it all comes down to who they're comfortable dealing away. Look, the Mets are thin as it is in the system when it comes to arms. Obviously, they picked up a couple when it came to this last draft. They did a great job with, but they're still thin. So are they going to go back to that well and deal away a JT Ginn type like they did to get obviously Chris Bassett? Are they comfortable dealing away a Calvin Ziegler? Are they finally going to give up on a Matt Allen? Like, I'm not sure. It's going to be interesting because I would have to look out there and see who could potentially be available. But I do think that they're going to get creative in the like the example I gave you before. If they go out and signed and Andrew Heaney to a contract and then made a deal for another type of pitcher, like a number 3-4 type to fill in while focusing then on Jake, something like that. I could see that being the case, but I definitely agree with you that there's going to be a type of trade. And I saw an interesting one. May I throw it out there?
Yes. And I just want to say one thing about before you do that. In terms of money spent and money the kind of money being allocated, remember that the Mets outbid the Toronto Blue Jays for Kevin Gausman.
They did.
And had the Mets inked that deal, the Mets would be on the hook for another. This was before they went out and got Bassett, and great pivot. But the Mets would be on the hook for a lot of money in the rotation to Gausman and to Scherzer, and potentially picking up Cookie's option, which we can talk about in a couple minutes. Right. So I do think there is money to be spent because when they pivoted, they went out and they got Bassett, but it's on a 1-year deal. I don't think that they're going to bring Bassett back for a few different reasons, but I do think that the Mets have potential in the rotation specifically to spend money on Jake and also spend money somewhere else, whether it's Rodon or something like that, because, Ibby, they were going to do it last year.
Yeah.
They were going to do it. They were going to spend $20 million or $25 million, whatever the offer was for Gausman. They were going to do that, plus Scherzer, plus knowing that they were probably going to have to pay Jake. So I think in the rotation is where Met fans should not be surprised at all if there's not one being Jake, but two big moves somewhere financially because the Mets have the money to do it. Go ahead.
I do believe that the Mets should 100% be in the market to attack Carlos Rodon. I think they should, because again, this rotation has to get a little bit younger, which kind of contradicts the trade offer that I'm going to throw out there right now.
Hit me with it though. I want to know it.
But it makes sense because it's a salary dump on both ends. It was calling up the Arizona Diamondbacks. Would you do this? I think you would, but I'll ask anyway. Would you?
I have a feeling I know who's going to be at the head of this, but go ahead.
Would you take on the contract of Madison Bumgarner coming back to you, along with I think it was like a middle reliever, because we're going to need relievers, and then they toss back a middle reliever as well, and you throw in a lower end guy, and you give back to them some catching depth, and you get out from underneath the rest of James McCann's contract. It would be a net positive on the Diamondbacks end, getting out from the rest of Bumgarner's money. Would you? And look, Madison Bumgarner is only 33 years old, but at the same time, he's not the pitcher that he once was. A lot of wear and tear.
Yeah.
So
7 and 15, 4.88 ERA
not
last
great.
year, and I know that doesn't tell the whole story, but
still the surface there, not great. But would you do something like that to get another starting pitcher here, get out from the McCann contract, which then allows you to let Alvarez and Tomas be behind the plate, DH, however you're going to go about that, and go from there in terms of how you might want to construct and build this team? Would you do something like that? Or would you say, I'd rather try to find another way to either get rid of McCann or build my pitching staff a different way?
I think this is what you would call a secondary or tertiary move. I would not hate this because I think the Mets do need to get out from McCann's contract. I think that's a given. Okay. But I also think if you look at the landscape of catching around Major League Baseball, it's very bad. And this is more of an indictment on catching in Major League Baseball than it is a positive about McCann. But if you look at McCann's numbers, especially because of the way he plays defense, he's actually a very serviceable starting Major League catcher right now. Now, the Mets can upgrade within their own system and save money doing so. So I think, like, if Alvarez was still one more year away, I would say there's no shot. The Mets are going to run it back with McCann. They're going to hope to finally get some semblance of legitimate production from him that they signed him for, and they're going to run it back with McCann and Nito and see what's up. They're not going to sign a catcher. They're not going to spend money there. But because the Mets can trade McCann and maybe eat somewhere between 35 and 50% of the money owed to him, I think that would be a better move than swapping bad deal for bad deal and bringing in Bumgarner. However, I think if they spend other places, they are kind of in a position now where they need to round out a third or fourth spot in the rotation and they still have McCann. I think then this becomes a more feasible deal to execute. So I don't want to hedge. I just think I don't hate the deal. I don't think it's crazy. I just think other things need to materialize before I would do that deal because I just don't want to be locked in to, Madison Bumgarner. Now, look, he's only signed through the end of 24. He's obviously making a lot of money, but I do think Madison Bumgarner as a third or fourth starter on this team would be better than having James McCann on this team. So 1 for 1, sure. But I do think there are other moves that need to be made. Stevie Mack, little tongue-in-cheek, says, just sign DeGrom and Verlander and bring on that Ben Gay Metamucil sponsor money. Jokes aside, Ibby, would you entertain signing Justin Verlander to the kind of deal that he just came off of? Maybe not a 2-year deal, but a 1-year deal with an option for high money. Now, the Mets are win now mode.
Right.
So I don't know that I would sign DeGrom and Verlander, but let's say DeGrom opts to go play somewhere else. look, I know it's a short-term fix, but, signing Verlander for 1 year and then Rodon maybe for the long-term contract and going Max, Verlander, Rodon, it's not crazy.
It's not crazy. It's not crazy. I have a hard time seeing Verlander leave. At the same time, Houston's always smart with their moves, and maybe they're saying, look, this is it for him. We don't think there's anything left.
Which you do have to worry about. It's like dealing with the Rays or something.
Right.
It's like, well, if Houston's ready to move on from him, why?
Right. Well, why do they want to move on? So I have a hard time seeing him leave, but at the same time, he's a smart businessman. He's made his money. He was able to get $50 million over 2 years at an older age, and he delivered. He has delivered in aces for them. Would I entertain it? Sure, I'd entertain it. Why not? It's Justin Verlander. If for a 1-year deal, of course. Any team that's close or wants to compete would be dumb to not want to be interested in him. But it is a risk, and I do think it carries weight of the risk aspect because of, again, I'm not saying there's something wrong with Max, but seeing how Max has finished the last 2 years, taking out another player like that, and then hoping that everything just clicks and everything's all well and good. I think it's a huge risk. So entertain, surely. Do I think it will happen? Probably not. I still think he's going to end up going back to Houston on a 1-year deal because, again, when you're on the best team, regardless if they win or lose this year, if you're on the best team, like, just keep on that route because he seems like he's in a different place. I saw some of his interviews with Ken Rosenthal, just talking about how he's in a different headspace in terms of respecting the game and understanding how much time he has left and taking in everything. So it's like he's been there for a while now. He's legit revived his career. Look, the guy was dead in Detroit, absolutely dead as a doornail in Detroit, and on the back end of his deal there, he goes to Houston and he completely reinvents himself. And I have a hard time seeing him leave that, specifically because of the age that he's at. Entertained for the Mets? Absolutely. Do I think he's going anywhere? I don't think so.
Yeah, I also think, look, and this is all due respect, Justin Verlander is probably a first ballot Hall of Famer. So I just think the Mets can do better, and I think the Mets need to do better. Now, look, if they never signed Scherzer, and there was an opening in the 2 spot, and Verlander's coming off the year that he had, and the Mets were kind of set with younger upside pitchers, 3 through 5, and, they have DeGrom locked up. I could see that being a case where you're like, look, we're going to pair somebody with DeGrom. We're going to roll the dice for a year or two. The Mets have already made that move. That's what the Scherzer move was.
That's what Scherzer was, yes.
So I agree with you. I think it's more important to get younger, either through a trade or through signing a guy like Rodon. I think that's kind of the place they need to go. Or, a guy, guys who aren't free agents, but guys who were free agents last year, right? Like, Robbie Ray or a Gaussman. Like, to me, those are the kinds of places you have to investigate. Those are the kinds of guys, the guys who maybe haven't hit their stride yet. We talked about it in the first half with Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler was just coming into his own. It looks like his best baseball was in front of him.
Yep.
That's the kind of guy the Mets need to sign.
Yes.
A guy who's, 29, 27, or even 30, 31, who's a bit of a late bloomer. I'll go there before I go to another 37, 38-year-old pitcher.
Right.
That brings me to what's probably going to be our final topic here today. And obviously, over the next several weeks, Ibby, a lot of our conversation is kind of going to go this way, right? We're going to be talking because more news is going to come out. More stuff is going to break, and so we're going to maybe talk in circles on some of these things as more rumors and things like that happen. But Shohei Ohtani, look, I don't know if Shohei Ohtani is going to be available. I know he signed that 1-year deal to avoid arbitration and give them some cost certainty. I understand that the owner of the Angels doesn't like Steve Cohen. Okay, but Shohei Ohtani should be available. Shohei Ohtani had some things to say about the Angels organization that wasn't exactly great. The way that team is gone. He's got 1 year left. I would love to see Shohei Ohtani on the Mets. There's the connection with Billy Epler. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but SNY floated out the idea of Shohei Ohtani for Brett Beatty, Kevin Parada, or Alex Ramirez, a Mets prospect between 11 and 15, and a Mets prospect outside of the top 15. That was using the Dodgers deal that they acquired Max Scherzer and Trey Turner with as the blueprint.
Right.
Now, if that's the trade that gets it done, I will do it right now. I just don't think that trade is realistic. I don't think that gets it done.
I don't think so either. And I know everyone that talks about this idea of Shohei in a deal. Look, I understand he is a once-in-a-lifetime type of player, but I've seen a lot of great players get dealt on one-year deals. I've seen Francisco Lindor. I've seen Mookie Betts. I've seen some damn good ball players get dealt on one-year deals. And I've also seen the returns for those teams on the one-year deal. Now, look, time it happened, everyone thinks, oh, the Mets stole Francisco Lindor. Well, look, Andres Jimenez is a damn good ball player and had a fantastic year this year. Ahmed Rosario didn't really turn out to be the number one prospect that he once was, but
good
ball player, did his job for them, okay? Point being, everyone that automatically assumes you would have to include a Francisco Alvarez and basically give away your entire farm system for a given player, I don't buy it. That was the case if he was moved at this deadline. You would have to give up everything because you're given more time. Now, the only reason that would be different in terms of what you would have to give is if you have a Johan Santana situation where you're given a window and you're said, look, we're going to give you this. You have your window. You have your opportunity to sign this man, which is going to up the cost in terms of what you're giving away. If that's the case, that's completely different. But I'm operating under the assumption that you're trading for a guy on a 1 year who's basically coming to a place he hasn't been to, and he's going to say, I'm going to see how it is, and then I'm testing free agency anyway. Nobody, I don't care how great the player is, and I know Shohei is incredible. I'm not saying that he's not, but I don't think anybody is giving away their, with how smart teams are now when it comes to their farm systems and how they build, I don't see anyone giving away an entire farm system on the off shot that the guy would leave. Now, I know we have Steve Cohen, we have the money. The idea of him leaving shouldn't creep into anyone's head because if he wants a certain number, they'd hit that number. But I don't think it's going to cost as much as people think it will. But I also think it would cost a little bit more than that offer that you threw out there from SNY.
Yeah, I think that you have to be careful because people throw things out that aren't realistic because we've never seen a player like Shohei Ohtani before, right? So people say things like, well, if you pay him like a top slugger and a top pitcher, he's going to get $600 million. He's not going to get $600 million. That's not how it works. You don't just add the $200-300 million contracts that he would get if he was a separate entity and give him double. So you don't just say, oh, well, you know, this player was traded for X. He's two players, so you're going to have to trade him for X plus Y, and that's going to be the deal. No, he's one player. Now, will you have to bump up what you would give him in terms of player assets to acquire him or money? Sure, it's going to take a little bit of a bump because he does two things, but you don't just double it and assume that that's the thing. When I look at this trade, I don't think it's unrealistic. I just think it's more realistic if you swapped out one player. I think if you said the package was Francisco Alvarez instead of Beatty, plus then Alex Ramirez, because you're not going to give them Parada and Alvarez, doesn't make sense. But Alvarez, Alex Ramirez, and then a prospect 11 through 15 and a prospect outside of the top 15. I think that's a deal that could get it done right now. But I think when you're looking at this deal as it is constituted, I don't think it's far off. I just think you're adding. I think you're saying instead of Beatty and Parada or Ramirez, I think it's Beatty, Parada, and Ramirez, plus then a player outside of your top 15 and a 11 to 15 prospect. I think it's going to take 3 top flight prospects or a prospect the caliber of Francisco Alvarez to get this done. I just think that they have to bring back something that they can hang their hat on. You're never going to get fair value. You never do when you're trading a player like this. The Nationals are not going to get fair value for trading Juan Soto, but damn, they're going to try. So I think this is not a ridiculously bad offer the way that some people are making it out to be. I also don't think it's the deal that could get it done. I think somewhere in between is the way to go. And the last question I'm going to ask you, Ibby, before we sign off here today is everything being equal, and I'm not talking about waiting a year for free agency.
Okay.
This year, would you rather give up a prospect package similar to the one that we're talking about for Shohei Ohtani, or would you rather sign Aaron Judge for 6 years?
God, you put me on the spot, man.
Because with Ohtani, you're not getting a guarantee that you're re-signing him. You're not getting a window. You might re-sign him at the end of the year. You might even re-sign him the way the Mets re-signed Lindor before the season starts. But there's a negotiation. It's not a hard no. You're not getting a window. You're not getting the Santana window. So you're giving up, let's say, 5 prospects, 3 of whom are in your top 10. You're giving up 5 prospects, 3 in your top 10. None of them are Francisco Alvarez for Shohei Ohtani with no guarantees that he stays. Or you're giving Aaron Judge 6 years, and let's say to get it done, you have to give him $45 million a year. So 6 years, $270 for Aaron Judge, or 5 prospects, 3 in the top 10 for 1 year of Shohei Ohtani. Guaranteed 1 year.
I'm gonna talk through this real quick.
Please
I'm just gonna say that any other situation, I'd say this. I go, take the signing of a guy and keeping your farm system and keep everything flowing and building that way, because that's the proper way to go about it, right? It is. We're not talking about a normal player here with Shohei. We're not. Judge is a little bit older. The body, people question it. The double aspect of Shohei. In this situation, the way you presented it, I would say, in that case, I would say screw it, and I would go for Ohtani, because if I'm paying that type of money for a player in the end, and again, there's no guarantee I even keep the guy. I get that. But the idea is still there to pay the guy. So I would rather have Ohtani than Judge, even at the clip of what I'm going to have to give up for him. Now, having said that, I think that the Mets are more likely to wait for the guy to become a free agent, because I think they realize he's going to get there, because not many teams can trade for him and give him what he wants. So I would opt the wait aspect, have my cake and eat it too, because I think that they could in that sense. But based off of what you're asking me to answer, I would rather attack Ohtani in that case.
See, I think I go the other way. I'd rather get the cost certainty and just sign Judge.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing, and this is an unfair caveat, because I didn't give it to you, and I wasn't hiding this to give my argument more credence. But you said about waiting.
Right. I know.
If for some reason...
Yeah, I get it.
And Stevie Mac just said it.
Yeah.
If DeGrom comes back or not.
Yeah.
If DeGrom... I might be taking this in the opposite way that Stevie did. If DeGrom does not come back, I give as much. I get the deal with Aaron Judge done, period. Because they've got the money that they were going to spend on DeGrom, spend it on Judge. Go get me the power bat.
Okay.
And then I just wait it out with Ohtani. Because then I'm looking and I'm saying, we'll see what happens next year. Yeah. We'll see what happens. Now, I know that's an absurd amount of money, and the chances of you having Judge and Ohtani on the same team are absurd, and you're never going to do that likely, but I just wait it out. I wait it out. I don't jump at Ohtani because DeGrom's not here. I jump at Judge because DeGrom's not here, because the money is going to be comparable. The years are going to be comparable. You were going to be prepared to give it to DeGrom, just give it to Judge. That's how I feel about it. Now, I would go Judge either way, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I believe me. It's the way you present it. It's a great problem to have, and the way you present it, it's like it's a tough decision. And look, there's going to be more conversations like this throughout the offseason, because, like I said, it's going to be very interesting on how they choose to build and the decision that they're going to have to make. But, all things considered, I think they're going to try their best to hold on to their pieces in the farm unless something really makes sense. Because again, you can't just keep on depleting from that because you're never going to get to the model that you truly want to emulate. If that's what you want to do.
And I think 5-for-1 is dangerous.
It is dangerous, which is why I think, and you've said this in shows past where you go, look, you can't just assume that someone's going to be available. When someone's available, you jump at it. Judge is available, you jump at it. You don't know if Shohei's going to be available. You don't know if Juan Soto is going to be available. You don't know when these guys are going to be free. And I get that because, again, there's no guarantees when it comes to, an owner and a player sitting in a room and hammering out a deal, and then something happens, and all of a sudden you're like, well, there goes that pipe dream. It's not going to happen. It's going to be very interesting. I do think that the Angels would be stupid not to deal him. But I also think that they could have got a lot more than what they will get if they would have dealt him at this trade deadline. And if there's just one more thing I could put in, mainly because Rael had been mentioning it before, whatever Edwin Diaz wants, just give it to him. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I agree. Just because, look, closers do not get, he's going to get elite money, of course, but we're talking about less money than any of the other players that we've been talking about, right? Except maybe Brandon Nimmo, right? Like he's going to get in that ballpark, but he's going to get less than DeGrom. He's going to get less than Judge. He's going to get less than Trey Turner. He's going to get less than what you would have to pay Ohtani. Yes. Just pay Edwin Diaz. We didn't even talk about him, and because Ibby, I just think that one's a foregone conclusion. But that said, we do have to get out of here. So thank you to everybody who's watching. Thank you to everybody who has been commenting and keeping up with this. Please go ahead and tell your friends about the show. We've had a lot of referrals that way. Interacting with us live is the absolute best way to do it because we get to hear from you guys, and we love to hear from you guys. So that said, we'll be back with you next week. We'll probably be talking more about free agency. We'll also talk about whatever's going on in the World Series, obviously, because it's the nature of doing a baseball show. So that's Ibby. I'm John. This is Tilt Mets Do Us Part, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.